WBC interim for the 140 belt was on the line, headlined by Pitbull Cruz as he took on Lamont Roach. Very controversial, and the scorecards were definitely the talking point on social media.
Roach was controlling some portion of a round, and then out of nowhere, Cruz comes in and is able to land eye-catching, powerful punches.
That's what I liked about Lamont Roach. I mean, he's got some balls to go into the pocket with a guy whose specialty is to fight in the pocket and to try to match him one-on-one like that.
I was surprised to see Pitbull holding a lot, actually. Pitbull started like moving around and doing lateral movements. This isn't the Pitbull that we know.
What we saw was Pitbull Cruz coming out very strong the first half of the fight and, dropping Lamont Roach for the first time ever.
That should not be underplayed, like the heart and the chin that Lamont Roach has.
Welcome back to another episode of the Last Round Podcast, where we cover everything from traditional boxing to influencer boxing and everything in between. Today's episode, we'll be going over the Lamont Roach versus Pitbull Cruz main card and giving our full breakdown and thoughts about the entire showing. But before we get into the episode, make sure to like and subscribe and follow us on all forms of social media. Lastly, we're trying to build up a community on Discord, and you guys joining would be greatly appreciated. And now diving into the episode, let's start off with the headliner. WBC interim for the 140 belt was on the line, headlined by Pitbull Cruz as he took on Lamont Roach. Fun fight, definitely my fight of the night. Very controversial, and the scorecards were definitely the talking point on social media. Majority draw. Many fans saw it one way. Many other fans saw it the other way. What are your guys' thoughts about this fight?
Yeah, it was a very close fight. To me, last week when we were giving our predictions, I figured that it was going to be one-sided. I figured that either Lamont Roach or Pitbull Cruz, either one of their styles was going to come in and just dominate and overtake the other one. And that is not what we saw. What we saw was Pitbull Cruz coming out very strong the first half of the fight, and dropping Lamont Roach for the first time ever, and then Lamont Roach finding the timing, the range, and making the adjustments necessary for the later half of the fight. And he did a pretty good job. I want to say he made that fight competitive, and he came back. And I think because it was such a fan-friendly type of fight, both fighters wanted to be in the pocket. The championship rounds were fun as well. Very excited to see, and within social media, a lot of people had different opinions about who won this fight.
Yeah, I think going in, people kind of were under the assumption that Lamont Roach was going to outclass Pitbull Cruz, and I think it definitely stemmed from the fact that Lamont Roach obviously put up a fantastic performance against Gervonta Davis. But listen, Cruz, say what you want about him, right? He is one-dimensional. You know what you're getting yourself into when you fight him. But he does have balls, and he has this like magical effect of making you fight his fight. And I think Lamont Roach kind of fell into that a little bit. And Roach's style, I feel, was kind of a little bit it helped Pitbull Cruz, because Roach, he isn't really a big mover. He's not a fighter that utilizes lateral movements very much. He's more in the pocket. He uses waist movement. He uses little blocks and catch and shoot type of style, where I think Pitbull Cruz, that was really good for him, because, like you said, that knockdown was a huge moment for Cruz, and he really needed that knockdown. And he caught him in between Lamont Roach trying to counter him. So it was a close fight. I was expecting a close fight. I did think that their skills were similarly matched. At least the styles would clash very well. I didn't think a style was going to be, one of them was going to dominate like the other, but I was happy about the fight. And the scorecards, listen, this always happens with the fans. When we see a draw, people obviously feel like it's nothing really happens. It's kind of like it's a blue ball, you know. Nothing really happens. They both, you know, shut out their best, and nothing really happened. But I think it was a fair decision, you know, considering the fact that Pitbull Cruz got a point deducted for a completely legal blow. So, you know, it's hard to say who really won the fight. I think I'd have to go back and watch it to really give a clear winner.
Yeah, a lot of people on social media were definitely upset. I think talking about the scorecards, one of the judges gave the fight 115-111 to Pitbull Cruz, a scorecard that didn't go down well with people on X. Many people were claiming corruption, a corrupted judge in that aspect. But Pitbull Cruz himself was claiming that the referee was biased towards Lamont Roach, especially that round 7 point deduction for a supposed low blow. That low blow, though, was a pivotal point in the fight. I mean, round 3, Lamont Roach gets dropped for the first time in his career. Wasn't hurt, but clearly dropped. And that first half of the fight was definitely in Cruz's favor. So that seventh round point deduction on Pitbull Cruz definitely did have an effect on the scorecards of the fight, because if that point deduction wouldn't have been made, we would have been seeing Pitbull Cruz getting the win. You guys agree that, you know, Asa just mentioned that, you know, it's fair to give it a draw, but a lot of people online were claiming that Roach got robbed. Do you agree with that statement, Rudo?
I think for me personally, I did have Roach winning by a round or two, but when it comes to fights like this, it was very close. There was some rounds that a lot of people can maybe, you know, even if you look back on it, maybe you can still give it a swing round. You know, maybe Roach was controlling some portion of a round, and then out of nowhere, Cruz comes in and is able to land eye-catching, powerful punches, you know, and landing them cleanly. And then, you know, it was also a pro-Mexican or pro-Cruz crowd. So, you know, Cruz, all he has to do is land 1 or 2 punches, and then you just feel the atmosphere. You feel the energy from the crowd, you know, giving him that rally. And, you know, maybe it did have, and, you know, that does tend to maybe sway the judges in their scoring. But it was a very close fight. And honestly, I wasn't expecting to draw. I was thinking that maybe the judges were gonna announce a winner. But again, I'm not mad, because it was such a close fight. You know, it was such a close fight. So, you know, I wouldn't be down. I would be down to watch a rematch. But at the end of the day, you know, it was such a close fight. I'm not mad about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are mad also because the second half of the fight, Roach gained a lot of momentum. You know, he made a great adjustment in the fight where he was a little bit more flat-footed. And when going into this fight, you know, last week on the episode, I said, you know, he can't really fight like that because Pitbull is just going to continue to throw combinations at him. But I think he did it with some decent success, man. You know, obviously he was still getting caught with some big shots. But all in all, I think it went a little bit better for him when he was like standing more in the pocket, utilizing the Philly shell, trying to catch and shoot, counter with little short punches. And I was surprised to see Pitbull holding a lot, actually. It was really surprising because I thought Pitbull was going to be very comfortable inside the pocket, but it seemed he either wanted to be in mid-range, or if they got too close, he'd just hold. And we also, this probably played also another role in the public's perception, is that Pitbull started like moving around and doing lateral movements. This isn't the Pitbull that we know. You know, the Pitbull that we know goes forward and, you know, doesn't stop throwing combinations. So it was very surprising to me to see that. And I think the fans probably saw that and were thinking, oh, Pitbull is getting frustrated, or he's getting outboxed, or, you know, he's trying to come up with something new because Roach has figured him out. And I think for the second half of the fight, it was true. You know, Roach, he was coming back from it. And watching it, I was actually a little bit worried because Cruz started off the fight so well, but, you know, it kind of got out of his hands. So I understand, yeah, when I watched it initially, and I saw the scorecards and, you know, they announced that it was a draw, I did think Roach won. but it could be a little bit of a bias just because of the momentum that was swinging towards Lamont Roach.
Yeah, I also want to talk about the adjustments. The second half of the fight, we started seeing Roach being able to time and land cleaner punches, big punches on Pitbull Cruz. And I think one of the reasons why is because of what you said, the Philly show. I think the first half, what surprised me the most, and I stated it last week, I thought Roach was going to be more in the, just moving around a lot more. And, you are correct. His style isn't really catered towards that, but I figured why would he want to stand in front of a Mexican guy who, loves his opponents to just stand there in the pocket. He's the pocket rocket. You know what I'm saying? He wants his opponent to stay in there so that he can just rock him and sock him their head off. But, so he stood there, and I think he was standing almost like directly in front of Cruz. And I think it wasn't until the second half is that when he turned his body a little bit and then started using that Philly show, I think we started seeing him be a lot more comfortable and just being able to time Cruz. There was a few moments where, especially that hook, I can't remember the round it was, but he landed a hook and he got Cruz out of balance. Those are the small things that, you see in a championship level fight, or in this case, a fighter, making the adjustments necessary to then, have the rhythm or the pace or, start dictating the pace of the fight and then having things go more towards his way, have it more favorable.
Yeah, I mean, it was a double-edged sword as well because, you are putting yourself in the line of fire for Pitbull Cruz, and he was still getting caught with some very heavy shots. And this is something that I was actually very impressed by. Roach, he had one fight at 130. He's a champion at 130, right? He went up in weight class to fight Gervonta Davis at 135. He got a draw. He only fought once. He went up another weight class to fight at 140 against Pitbull Cruz, who we know he has power and he hits very hard. You look at him and he's putting all his weight behind his shots, right? So they're heavy. He took some massive hooks, massive right hands, good body shots, and he ate all of them. So I was very impressed by Lamont Roach's chin. I think that's probably his saving grace of that style, just being in the pocket more, because he was getting caught very clean, more than he was caught in the Gervonta Davis fight. But just because he had such a good chin, he was able to take these shots from Cruz. So it was very impressive to me, and I think that should not be underplayed, the heart and the chin that Lamont Roach has.
Yeah, last week we were talking about or questioning what kind of style that Lamont Roach would be coming into the fight. If he was going to do in the pocket or just lateral movements, trying to outbox Pitbull Cruz, and we got our answer this past weekend. But online people were saying, "Yo, Rayo Valenzuela gave you the blueprint on how to beat Pitbull Cruz. You're making it a lot harder on yourself by fighting this type of way." And of course, I agree with that statement. He did make it he made it a lot more difficult than it could have possibly have been if he would have taken the blueprint from El Rayo and applied it to this fight this past weekend. But that's what I liked about Lamont Roach. I mean, he's got some balls to go into the pocket with a guy whose specialty is to fight in the pocket and to try to match him one-on-one like that. And I think that's definitely gonna help Lamont Roach in the public's eye, because they're not gonna say, oh, he's not like a Shakur who's gonna outbox you, quote unquote, make it boring, or a Lara even that we saw on the undercard of this event. He's gonna be a guy who's gonna be in your face in the pocket and trying to exchange with you, and that's why I think it's gonna make him a very big I think he's a fan favorite. He's one of my fan favorites now. I mean, I wasn't expecting this type of style from Lamont Roach, but seeing them go in and trying to match Pitbull Cruz in the pocket was definitely entertaining, and it's what really gave this fight even more intensity, more fire in it. But look, now Lamont Roach, he is coming off a second draw for this year. I mean, these are the two biggest fights of his career, and he's yet to get a W. He stated, in the post-fight interview, clearly distraught about the scorecard, very upset about it. He even stated in the post press conference that he thinks he broke his hand in the 5th round. So if it's true, then Lamont Roach will probably be out within the first half of 2026. We probably won't even see him until the later portion of the year. So Lamont Roach, he was 2025 could have been the biggest year of his career if he would have gotten both of the wins. But now he's got to go back, like he said, to the drawing board and try to see what's next for him after this, alleged injury. Thoughts about Lamont Roach and his future at the 140?
Yeah, Lamont's performance throughout 2025 was, I don't want to say really good, but I mean, it was his breakout year. But unfortunately, he didn't get any of those 2 decisions. But I think these past 2 fights were the biggest of his whole career, and he performed very well. Against a lot of different odds. Against both of these different fighters, and he performed very well. So, I mean, he surprised me a little bit too. I mean, his record is pretty good. He only had 1 loss. Still very surprised, in that loss that he had. But, he's bounced back from that. And, he's a champion. And then he goes up 2 different weight classes in 2 different fights. And he performed very well against very dangerous fighters. So, I think next year we're going to see very big things from Lamont Roach's team. I think for me, he's definitely, these are very big statements. This guy has shown that he can bang with a guy who's a heavy puncher, but he can also box and be very smooth and be, use his ring IQ in order to beat opponents. So, Lamont Roach is a guy who has quite a different abilities, a lot of tricks up his sleeve, and I think whether he goes back to 135 or decides to stay at 140, I think he could have great success.
Absolutely. And it's like you said, this was his breakout year. So, listen, as a competitor, obviously you're not going to be very happy that you got 2 draws. So you didn't get any wins on your record. So that it does bother you a little bit. But that being said, look at the people that he drawed against. Gervonta Davis, Pitbull Cruz. Both of these are world champions. Gervonta Davis has been in the top 10 pound for pound the last couple of years. People highly respect him. And so that's impressive by itself. And I think just because he drew these fighters, but now he broke into the boxing mainstream. Now people want to see him. Now he has a much bigger following, a much bigger fan base. Whereas, when we go back a couple years, we knew who Lamont Roach was, but no one else really knew him. Unless you were a real diehard boxing fan and you actually followed the sport, maybe you'd catch one of his fights. But they were never big events. Now this is his 2nd pay-per-view headline, and I'm sure it did well. The crowd in San Antonio was going crazy. I know they were for, Pitbull Cruz, but still, I mean, it's still going to translate to him as well. I'm sure there was a lot of fans that came out and said, oh my, you know what, Lamont Roach, he's a pretty good fighter, so maybe I'll watch him in the future. So I think this is great for Lamont Roach, honestly. 2 draws, that's okay. It happens. But who did you draw against? You drew against some of the best fighters right now, so I think he should still be proud. And if he does actually have a broken hand, take your time. Don't rush back into the sport. Get better, and then have a very strong ending to 2026.
Yeah, that's true. And, a lot of people were saying, what's next for Lamont Roach? They want to see him still at 140. He's a great addition to the weight division. But now going to Pitbull Cruz, he retains his interim status at the WBC. And, I mean, he's next in line for Subriel Matias, coming off some failed PEDs. He's getting a 1-year probation. He can still go on with his fight against Dalton Smith. So that's a big fight right there. And if I was Pitbull Cruz and his team, I would say let's go for the champion next. Lamont Roach rematch can wait. We can have that in the back burner. That's still a big fight. It's an even bigger fight now after this first one, but we want to become champions. And why not go up against, we have our interim title shot. We're next up in line. Why not wait for the champion and take him on and make the occasion even better and bigger for the rematch against Lamont Roach. So Subriel Matias, if he beats Dalton Smith next year, will be a massive fight for both Matias and Pitbull Cruz. Puerto Rico against Mexico, champion against former champion. Two styles that are going to clash very well, and it's definitely going to be a barn burner type of fight. So Pitbull Cruz has big options, and his options will continue to grow, especially once he's giving fights like these, very entertaining fights. So Pitbull Cruz definitely has a lot of things going for him for 2026. Thoughts about Pitbull Cruz and potentially having the title shot up next?
Yeah, before we go into that, would you guys want to see a rematch between Lamont Roach and Pitbull Cruz?
Yeah, of course. I think that's, I don't know, I think it should be done for sometime next year, but I don't believe it's going to happen right away just because of Lamont Roach and the supposed injury, and also Pitbull Cruz, I think, would rather go for a belt next and try to, become champion, a two-time champion at the division. So it's definitely something I want to see, but I don't see it happening right away.
Yeah, I'd want to see it, of course. I think it was a fun fight, and obviously it ended in a draw, so let's see who's the better fighter.
I would like to see that rematch too, but I don't think it's going to be next in line, and I don't think we're going to see it, within next year. But yeah, I would for sure like to see it down the line. But in regards to both fighters, I would love to see Cruz in a championship fight. I think he's a guy who, it doesn't matter that he's the smallest guy in that weight class. I think he's still going to be a very dangerous fighter. And I think whether you put him against any of the four champions, I think he's going to be able to put up a very good performance. He's always going to give 110%. And I think that's what the fans like about him. There was over 10,000 people at the arena. And they were all chanting his name because they know that Pitbull Cruz is a guy who leaves he leaves everything in the ring. And he's a guy who, he's always going to go forward. And I think that's always a dangerous thing. In regards to Lamont Roach, I think I would love to see him go down a weight class, whether it's 135 or 130. But I think at those two weight classes, I think he would have a better job of, maybe become a champion. I think 140 is maybe too much for him, although he did pretty good against a power puncher. But I think I would love to see him go down and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, I mean, Cruz is I think he still has a lot of chances or a lot of opportunity at 140, 147, maybe even 147. Go up and fight Rolly. You beat him once, right? Go up there, become a two-division world champ. But this is something that it's kind of funny. Roach supposedly hurt his hand. We haven't heard any official reports, but he did say that he felt like he hurt his hand. It was hurting throughout the fight. Gervonta Davis also hurt his hand fighting Pitbull Cruz. So, I mean, maybe this guy is made out of something different, man. Pitbull Cruz he's built different because the fighters that he faces, they punch him and they hurt their hands. I don't know what he's made out of, but he's a tank. He's a machine, right? And I'm a big fan, like you said, a lot of people, I think Cruz has definitely broken into the mainstream of boxing. So I've been very impressed by him. I know he has a lot of haters. But that being said, you can't just... if he's fighting... if he's fighting, then you're gonna have to watch because he's just so entertaining. So I can't wait to see what he does next.
Yeah, he definitely answered a lot of questions and a lot of critique by the fans, claiming that this was a big pressure fight for Cruz to perform, and he performed well, and he got the draw, retained his status as WBC interim, and is looking for a shot at the champion sometime next year. But speaking of, you spoke about Lamont Roach potentially, he can navigate his career, fight at 135, maybe fight at 140, but let's keep in mind 135 has got a new WBC interim champion. The co-main event of this card featured Stephen Fatboy Fulton taking on O'Shaquie Foster to settle the beef. Why did I call him Fatboy, you're asking? Well, it seems to us, or it seems to Fulton, that he was tempted by the Thanksgiving dinner that bro ate a little too much, had too many plates, and came in 2 pounds overweight. Now, this whole drama show that happened on the weigh-ins Friday was definitely adding more wood to the fire, or more gas to the fire, in the aspect of the WBC, because the WBC was already in the whole big drama show with Terrence Crawford earlier in the week by stripping them off his belt at 168, and Crawford going on social media and calling them out, saying, "You guys can keep it. I don't care about you guys. You know, you guys were offering or asking for too much," or whatever was going on. So there was already the beef between the WBC and Terrence Crawford, and then the weigh-in issue with the WBC suddenly changing it from a 130 fight to a 135 fight, as if they were rewarding Stephen Fulton. Now, this was a big controversial move. A lot of people online, I think everyone, was very upset about this. And at the end of the day, it didn't even matter, because O'Shaquie Foster performed a clinic on Saturday night and became the new WBC 135 interim champion, up next against Sugar Shakur Stevenson. Thoughts about this fight?
Yeah, before I even get into the fight, let's not act like we're surprised and say that sports aren't corrupt. Not just talking about boxing, but all sports. There's always some type of scandal every other year that there's something going on, and I think the WBC has been under hot water within the past week. They stripped Terrence Crawford, and then out of nowhere, normally when a fighter doesn't make weight, he doesn't get the chance to, even if he does beat the other guy, and if the other guy agrees to fight him still, he doesn't get the belt. The belt just remains vacant. But then for whatever reason, Mauricio Suleiman and the WBC organization decided to upgrade or elevate this fight to interim WBC lightweight championship belt, which I think it rubbed off the wrong way for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, he's a corrupt piece of shit, man. I mean, this is in something that's like new with Mauricio Suleiman. Especially, I feel like if you follow boxing a lot, the WBC, they do listen. Crawford critiqued them, and it was absolutely true. Mauricio Suleiman thinks that the WBC is like the best belt, and it's the one that you're striving for, and so it's better than all the other sanctioning bodies. That's not true, man. Like, if you're the WBA champion, guess what? You're a world champion in boxing, just like the WBC. You're not. It's not something special. It's the exact same as the other three sanctioning bodies. So, Mauricio Suleiman is always, fishing for some money. I swear. I mean, it's true. Listen, Crawford said that he paid the fines or the fees for the other sanctioning bodies, and they all agreed on a specific fee. But no, the WBC, they wanted a little bit extra. Why? Why do you need a little bit extra? Who are you? Like, why are you? You're not the one that's going inside of the ring. You're not doing anything. So it's just Mauricio Suleiman, the president of the WBC. He just wants more money. He was charging an extra $300,000 for Terrence Crawford, and Crawford said no. He's like, I'm not gonna give it to you. So I think that definitely played a massive role in the Fulton and Foster fight being changed, because Mauricio Suleiman wanted a piece of the pie for that fight. So he elevated it, and now I'm sure he made a pretty penny on that fight.
Yes, which it didn't really make any sense. If you're not even a boxing fanatic like that, maybe you were just like kind of confused. But even the people who actually follow the sport were mega confused, because this normally doesn't even happen. Like, normally, like, it's what I stated, that fighter who missed weight doesn't get the opportunity to even fight for that belt. He just is excluded from that. And I think a way to kind of like get it in through the heads of the people who don't follow the sport like that, it's almost as if like an NFL team, Major League Baseball team, they win the World Series, the Super Bowl, but they still have to pay 3 to 5% on their whole commission of that year. That, yes, you won, but you still have to pay this amount to be considered or to be the champion or whatever. And I think that doesn't really make any sense. You know, I mean, the Ring magazine, you know, if you get that belt, you don't have to pay any fees.
That's literally free. It's free. And then now, because Turkey took it over, the belt is made of literally real gold. So like if anything, that's the most prestigious one of all. You know, fuck the WBC and the president, because like he's just like, yeah, you know, now technically Crawford isn't an undisputed champion. So which is funny, the only undisputed champion right now is Naoya Inoue, because Usyk was also stripped earlier. Because he didn't want to fight Fabio Wardley, and Fabio Wardley was elevated. So, you know, Inoue is the only world champ, but it's just completely unfair for Crawford. And, you know, the public still sees him as an undisputed champion because he dethroned Canelo. So it's crazy, man. And I feel like it sets a bad precedent. You know, just if the sanctioning bodies, if they want more money, they're like, give me more money or else I'm just going to take your belt away. You know, Crawford's in a very lucky position because he had all four of them, and he's like a superstar. What if you're like a not a well-known fighter, you become a world champion, and then the sanctioning body's like, okay, give me some more percent. It's like, what if I can't, you know? And if you don't pay, then they strip you, and then you're a nobody again, you know? So I don't know, man. I feel like this definitely brought to light a lot of the corruption or a lot of the shady business that goes on in boxing. And I'm glad that Crawford, you know, stood his ground and said, you know, I'm not paying you anything because I'm the one that took all the punches and got my hand raised.
Well, now O'Shaquie Foster maybe will have to be paying his WBC commission after winning the interim belt in a masterclass performance against Stephen Fulton. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this fight was meant to be for O'Shaquie's WBC at the 130, but Stephen Fulton came in 2 pounds overweight. The fight then suddenly changed to a lightweight interim title shot, which was the dumbest thing that could have possibly have been done for the fight. So instead, they fought at 135 for the belt, for the vacant interim belt. And, you know, this fight was just a one-class showing it, and Stephen Fulton definitely showcased, I don't know, he looked sloppy, he looked confused, he didn't look ready to be there. Meanwhile, O'Shaquie Foster probably looked the best he's ever looked, honestly, especially his last couple of fights have been pretty close. He has been getting critiqued about him. So this was definitely a turning point for him, and he showcased who he was, showcased that he's a legitimate champion, a legitimate fighter, and now he is a legitimate interim WBC belt holder. Next up in line for Shakur Stevenson, which Shakur went online and claiming that O'Shaquie Foster would do nothing to him, which I fully agree. But do you guys have any major thoughts about this co-main event this past weekend?
Yeah, I think it's super crazy for a fighter to talk all this shit and then perform like shit. Like, I could not believe the fact that, you know, it must be the Philadelphia or it must have been the Timberlands talking for Stephen Fulton, because for him to say all those things throughout the whole 2025 and then to perform like that, I was very surprised. You know, he performed like shit, and O'Shaquie Foster performed like a true champion, and I think, you know, the better man won.
Yeah, it was an embarrassing performance by Stephen Fulton. I think, listen, it was going into this fight, I definitely did think that O'Shaquie Foster was the better fighter. That being said, I didn't think it was going to be this one-sided. Like, it was actually kind of bad. It was Fulton seemed like he was in quicksand. Like, he couldn't even, his legs were so heavy, so flat-footed. He tried to step into the fight, or he tried to step in with like a jab, and just completely out of range. Whereas Foster, whenever he'd start throwing punches, he'd catch him with jabs, with hooks, with right hands. Fulton really couldn't find him, and I think that was definitely the theme of the fight, is that range wins everything. You know, I think Fulton could be as quick as O'Shaquie Foster, but he doesn't have the same range management, the same distance management, and every single time he would throw, he'd just fall short. So it really did make him look like he didn't even belong in the same ring as O'Shaquie Foster. And like you were saying too, Fulton was talking so much trash leading up to this fight, and he was very confident in himself. But I think he definitely, after this fight, he has to go back to the drawing board and, maybe humble himself a little bit, work on some new skills, which, funnily enough, he was actually the trainer is Boozy Ennis, which is the father of Boots Ennis, which Boozy Ennis actually has a pretty good team right now. But, this fight definitely did not show the highlights of Boozy Ennis. So it's just, it's sad for Fulton. Actually, it's not really sad for Fulton. He missed weight by 2 pounds, which is a lot. And he got gifted a 135 interim chance, and he got outclassed. And, good on him. Go back to 126 or maybe even 122 because that was your heyday. So we'll see what he does next. I don't think he's going to stay at 135 or even 130. I'm pretty sure he's going to go back to 126, but this fight just set a really bad precedent because he can't even make 130,
Well, if he can't make 130, maybe he can't even make 126. So Stephen Fulton definitely was the big loser of the night. Actually, no, never mind. It's between Stephen Fulton and Johnny Beck being the big losers of the night, because if we go down to the 160, the Coco main event, we had Erislandy Lara taking on, I already forgot his name, bruv.
Gonzalez.
Johan Gonzalez. Johan Gonzalez has fought on Pro Box multiple times. We've seen him fight. Last fight was against Hurd in a split decision win for him, but originally, this fight was supposed to be for 160 unification with Johnny Beck. We talked about it last episode. This was supposed to be his coming out party. His moment of showcasing his skills in front of a pay-per-view crowd in San Antonio, Texas. A chance for him to get a very decisive, impressive win over Lara, and then call out Terrence Crawford at the 160 division. But in return, before he even, got on the flight to the USA, he was popped for PEDS usage. This is all alleged. He came out on social media saying that he was shocked himself by the news, that he's always been a clean fighter. WBC said they were going to investigate this situation, but at the end of the day, he missed his opportunity. No. Johan Gonzalez accepted the fight on Tuesday, and that led to a very, very lackluster fight at the 160 with Lara coming out on top. Thoughts about the whole Johnny Beck situation?
Yeah, so we talked about the most exciting fight of the night. This was the most boring fight of the night. Gonzalez put up a worthy performance. I think for the people that were behind the production of this card, I think for them to get a guy like Gonzalez had a pretty respectable record, you know what I'm saying? A power puncher, and then he only had like 4 losses. And most of his wins had been by like KO. So I think, on paper that was pretty good. But I mean, it didn't really look like this guy was even training. Lara, being 42, was able to drop this guy. I don't remember how old Gonzalez was, but he was, obviously the much younger fighter, and yet he couldn't really do much. He was just there surviving. Congrats on him that, the people behind this card were gracious enough to give him the opportunity to get a check.
Yeah, man. It should have been the coronation of Johnny Beck, and instead, we got a snooze fest. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even watch the fight.
Did you also fall asleep?
I did. Because, I knew for a fact, listen, Lara, we know what he brings, and we've seen this guy before. I didn't think he was going to bring anything special, and it was just a very boring fight, and I knew it was going to be boring, so I didn't even try to watch the fight, so I didn't miss anything. I think this fight definitely could have been on the prelims. The only reason why Lara got this slot in the main event was because he was fighting Johnny Beck, and they were expecting Johnny Beck was going to get a KO, so it'd make the fans go crazy. And then Johnny Beck gets kicked out, and now we got a snooze fest. The crowd was completely dead throughout the whole fight, so it's I don't know. It's just not much else needs to be said, honestly.
Yeah, I think for me, in regards to Johnny Beck, I'm very interested to see what comes out of this, because I was very surprised, and I think the whole boxing world was very surprised The fact that this guy has been calling out the top guys in his weight class. He's also been calling out Canelo. No one pays attention to this guy, but he's undefeated, and everybody who he fights, he destroys. But maybe there must have been a reason why he was just destroying everybody.
Yeah, definitely not a very good situation for Johnny Beck. A lot of people are saying, Johnny Beck probably at home watching the fight, thinking to himself, damn, bro, I missed out on that bag. Because that fight, Lara and Gonzalez, was definitely not the best fight. Everyone online was absolutely shitting on it. Even the commentators were incredibly bored about it. So definitely a very big blotch, a big stain on the card on what could have been a great addition to it. But Johnny Beck was not able to come out clean for his VADA testing. So we'll see how that situation develops. We'll also see his future as a champion. I mean, he was a unified champion going into this. So we'll see whether or not he gets stripped from his belts. But, we had another middleweight fight on the card, the main or the opener, which we had El Mono Ramos as he took on Shane Mosley Jr. for the WBC interim. WBC champion is currently El Caballo Adames. And this fight was fun. Definitely my second favorite fight of the night. Featuring El Mono Ramos, who I am a fan of. And I don't know, this performance though, I would give him like a solid C+, B- type of performance, because he got the win. Not impressively, but he got the job done. New weight class, becomes an interim champion there. Next up in line for El Bronco or for Adames. So, good for him. But the way he performed, in my opinion, was very, very below expectations and definitely showed a lot of flaws within his game. But thoughts about El Mono Ramos against Mosley Jr.?
Yeah, I think for me, I was also surprised the way he performed against a guy who, I think when Shane Mosley Jr. turned professional, I think a lot of expectations were expected of him. He comes from a great boxing legend, Sugar Shane Mosley. This is a guy who beat Oscar De La Hoya twice. This is a guy who almost dropped Floyd Mayweather. And then this guy was also, he was a world champion throughout the majority of his career. But Junior has not panned out that way. He has been, kind of like in the background. Not a lot of people. After a few years, I think a lot of people weren't expecting much of him. But on Saturday night, he actually performed pretty well against someone who I considered, Ramos, a very dangerous contender, whether at 154 or maybe even at 160. But I think, personally for me, I think it was a style. I think the height and the style of Sugar Shane Mosley just kind of maybe not didn't confuse Ramos, but I think it gave him a lot of difficulty, and I think it was mostly because of the height. I think for whatever reason it really got to him, and just Ramos wasn't able to perform. And I think it was just one of those things where styles make fights, and I think Mosley and his team came with a pretty decent game plan, and they were able to kind of execute it and put up a decent performance.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. El Mono Ramos, he definitely underperformed, and Mosley overperformed. I actually was very impressed by his performance. I didn't think he was going to be able to last the 12 rounds, but he did. And good on him. And listen, he hurt Ramos too a couple of times in the fight, which was very impressive because, Mosley, he isn't really known for his power. His record doesn't really show a power puncher, but, regardless, he did catch him a couple of times. I think with the thing with Ramos was the fact that we saw a kind of a different style too from him. It was more, the key and the bread and butter was the counter right hand. A right hook. It was a right hook. Every time that Mosley would, initiate, Ramos would time him and catch him with a beautiful, beautiful hook. And that rocked Mosley a couple of times. But the thing is, I feel like he saw the success of that, and maybe he switched his style to just try to catch him with one or two heavy shots and knock him out. Because when I think about Ramos, I think about the volume. I think about the combinations. I think about the body work. I don't really think about a one-punch power, knockout artist. So I feel like that kind of got into his head a little bit, and he stopped throwing a lot of combinations, and he started relying on like 2-1-2 or 3-2, something like that, just to get the KO. Especially in the second half of the fight, he started getting even desperate and tired, which I'm not even used to seeing him like that. He was swinging some shots and missing wildly. I think he was just putting too much power behind his shots. I would have liked to see him slow down a little bit and put 4 or 5 punch combinations together, head and body. And I think he could have gotten Mosley out of there. But that being said, Mosley was definitely motivated, and he showed probably his best performance of his career.
Yeah, this was also Mosley's first time going for a major belt in the interim, and also his first 12-rounder. So he definitely performed well. He's got a massive chin on him, man, because he was taking those, especially those right hooks, right to the jaw, and he was eating them. And he was hurt a couple times, a bit buzzed, wobbled, maybe even, but he still came out forward and returned big shots on Ramos. So props to Mosley Jr. Definitely exceeded a lot of expectations for him. And I agree, Mono Ramos definitely underperformed for this fight, and I would have preferred him to go back to his original style of just being a volume, a great shot selection type of style that he always brings, especially at the 154. So definitely not the best performance, but he is now the new interim title holder for the 160. They stated that during this fight week, El Mono Ramos was saying how he's going to stay up at 160. He didn't feel that he was going to get a title shot soon at the 154. So why not test the waters and go up to 160? And he immediately got himself an interim shot. So good for him, even though personally for me, I think him being in addition to the 154 roster was definitely something I liked, and just more competition within that division. So it's a little sad for me to see him leave, but it's good for his career. He's 24, going up against maybe El Adames sometime next year if Adames ever decides to fucking fight. So we'll see what happens next for El Mono Ramos. But I mean, the 160 division is definitely one of the worst divisions in boxing. So maybe El Mono Ramos can add, a little bit more spice into that division, a little bit more life, especially now with Johnny Beck, who seems to be out of the picture for quite some time. But thoughts about El Mono Ramos and his future at 160?
I think at 160 he's still a very serious contender at the weight class, but his performance on Saturday does not scream championship level. He's next in line for Adames' belt, but if he performs the exact same way he performed on Saturday, he's not beating Adames. Like, he's not at all. Adames, there's a lot of critique that you can say for Adames, but you can't negate the fact that he's still a dangerous fighter. And I think Ramos, he needs to work on quite a few things. I mean, he can't fight the way he fought on Saturday against Adames. Adames is a guy who's sneaky and smart. This guy is able to put a trance on his fighter, and then out of nowhere be able to explode and land devastating shots. And Ramos is a guy that needs to go back to what he knows best, and just throwing 4 to 6 punch combinations and slowly break down his fighter.
Yeah, I think it was definitely the right move to go up to 160 because it's much easier to get a title shot. At 154, I think the commentators were saying this as well in between the fight. They were saying that El Mono Ramos at 154, they'd view him as a high risk and no reward type of fighter. So he didn't really get much opportunities. At 160, this is his second fight at 160, and he already has the interim title. And that's amazing, for your career. Listen, as a boxer, you want to be a world champion. And if one weight class isn't giving you that opportunity, switch weight classes. And that's exactly what he did. He went up to 160. And I know that weight class, the competition is a little thin, that ain't his fault. You know, I mean, you're just chasing a world title. So I think it's a great move by El Mono Ramos' team. And now he's the interim champion. I'd love to see a fight against Carlos Adames. I think that'd be a fantastic fight. And another thing, we can't just skip over the fact that Ramos is only 24 years old. I mean, this guy's super young. I didn't think he was that young, honestly. I think that beard makes him look older. But like 24 years old is super young, man. He still has so much career ahead of him. So, you know, he disappointed me a little bit, but I think he could still get those improvements going on. And, you know, for being 24 years old, he's in a great position as an interim champion already at 160. So I think we're going to see great things from El Mono Ramos.
Yes, his future looks very bright, especially now. Just one fight away, essentially, on paper, from a world title on his resume, but it's up against a big name like Carlos Adames, a dangerous fighter. So definitely a fight that hopefully can be made for next year. I can only see this fight happening if Turkey decides to play a part in it. I mean, he brought in Hamza Shiraz against El Adames, and in a fight that Adames honestly beat Hamza Shiraz. So definitely a lot of future for El Mono Ramos, and the 160 division seems to be adding at least a quality fighter into their roster. So I'm very excited to see what's next for him. But I think we covered everything that we wanted to cover in today's episode. Let us know down below your thoughts and your scorecards for the Lamont Roach against Pitbull Cruz. Do you agree with the draw? Do you think there was a robbery? Let us know what you guys are thinking down below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on all forms of social media. We are on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Lastly, we're trying to build up a community on Discord, and you guys joining would be greatly appreciated. This was Pablo, and I'm with Rudo and Asa, and this was the Last Round Podcast. Thank you for watching.